What can we expect from Klay Thompson this season? Let's get into this. Quickly before we get the video started, if you guys enjoyed this video and want to see more NBA content just like this one, hit that subscribe button and that post notification bell. Anyways, back to the video. Over the past few seasons, Klay Thompson has been dealing with injury after injury. He had an Achilles injury, and then after that, shortly after, he had an ACL injury, and of course for any player in any sport and just in life in general, it's very difficult for a person to go through one significant injury like that. But the fact that Klay Thompson actually went through two major injuries, and it was also kind of back to back, is obviously a very difficult thing for a guy like Klay Thompson to go through. But specifically talking about his ACL injury, of course after it initially happened, you have to get surgery and then you have to work yourself back to even be able to walk at a certain point, and then after you get that, you work a little more on your body, and then you kind of get back to that area where you can actually start shooting and doing light drills in basketball, and then you work your way back even more to do more drills and be able to do more things on the court, and you continuously work your way back until you become 100%. Now obviously all that is a long process and it takes around a year, maybe even longer for anybody to do that, and Klay Thompson was putting in a tremendous amount of work to even get back to that point. And once he kind of got back to that point where he was starting to feel comfortable on his ACL and he could run around, he can make some cuts, he can do a lot more things on the basketball court, then boom, during the offseason he actually tears his Achilles. So you just can imagine how difficult that would be for a guy like Klay Thompson, who put in all that work just to get back from an ACL injury, and now he had to go through all that again and maybe even more, because some people say Achilles injuries are even worse than ACL injuries. But the fact that after both his ACL injury and now more recently his Achilles injury, Klay Thompson is working back, and at this point it seems like he's on pace to actually play in the NBA this upcoming season, barring anything crazy with more injuries. You just have to give a guy like Klay Thompson so much credit for really having a true love for the game. Klay Thompson wouldn't be coming back from his ACL injury, and now on top of that also his Achilles injury, if he didn't have a true love for the game and a true passion for it. So you have to give Klay Thompson a ton of credit for what he's been able to do, and hopefully for his sake and for the NBA world's sake, Klay Thompson could actually come back for the Golden State Warriors this upcoming season, and he can actually be healthy for at the very least one full season, and hopefully season after season after that. But people might have forgot at this point, because Klay Thompson has been out of the NBA for some time now, but when Klay Thompson was playing in the NBA, he was an absolute beast. He was one of the best three-point shooters of all time. Him and Steph Curry were an absolute dynamic duo. Klay Thompson wasn't only a guy who was a great offensive player, he was actually a great defensive player as well. He was just a complete package and the perfect player to have alongside on your team. But let's look at Klay Thompson's game point by point to really see how great he was before his injuries. Let's first start talking about Klay's three-point shooting ability. So of course Klay is known for his three-point shooting ability, and he's one of the best shooters in the NBA currently, and probably one of the best shooters of all time as well. Klay's main ability from that three-point range is definitely the catch and shoot three-point jump shot. Luckily for him, he has other guys on his team that can set him up pretty easily and effectively, specifically a guy like Steph Curry, but also Draymond Green, who doesn't get enough credit for his passing and playmaking ability. But Klay Thompson does very well either spotting up from that three-point range or coming off a down screen for a very tight window three-point jump shot as well, because he has a very quick three-point shot. But something that I don't really think a lot of NBA fans give him credit for is he's not only a catch and shoot three-point jump shooter, he can actually create for himself as well from that three-point range in terms of step backs and side steps. More recently he's been adding those within his game more recently, but even besides that, he definitely has somewhat of a handle and can cross over into a three-point jump shot. I think that's something that he doesn't get enough credit for, but obviously his main ability from that three-point range and his main ability on the offensive side of the ball is that catch and shoot three-point jump shot. But now talking about Klay's mid-range shooting ability, it's obviously very similar to his three-point shooting ability. He's a great catch and shoot mid-range shooter. He's also very good at that pull-up mid-range jump shot, and also something that he's been adding within his game more recently is that post turnaround fadeaway, which I mentioned in a lot of my videos is a very effective shot. But the fact that Klay actually has a naturally high jump shot in terms of where he shoots it from, and also a very quick release, makes that post turnaround fadeaway that much more effective, as well as that pull-up mid-range jump shot. But now talking about Klay's ability to get all the way to the basket, he obviously was decently athletic, although he didn't get enough credit for, and we have seen him have some nice crazy posterizing dunks from time to time, but once he gets to the basket, his main ability is just to finish around there with layups. He's not really going to challenge the opposing team's center that much in terms of trying to dunk over them, but sometimes he'll try to be a little crafty once he gets in the paint and just try to finish a layup around them. But I think there's also perception about Klay that he's only a catch and shoot three-point shooter but I demonstrated the other things that Klay Thompson can do, and in my opinion, I think he could definitely create for himself in terms of his offensive abilities. But overall, of course, Klay Thompson's main ability is his three-point shooting. But what made Klay so dynamic and so great was not only was he amazing on the offensive side of the ball, but he was also fantastic on the defensive side of the ball and one of the best defenders we had in the NBA. Of course, on ball, Klay was absolutely fantastic. He would always guard the opposing team's best player and do as good of a job as you could possibly do on the guys. But besides even just being an amazing on-ball defender, Klay was also an amazing off-ball defender. You see in the NBA time and time again, there's some defenders in the NBA that are great on the ball, but once they're off the ball, they're not paying as close attention, and sometimes their player that they're defending can easily get backdoor for a wide open dunk when they're cutting to the basket, or just get a wide open three because they're not paying as close attention. But with Klay, that's definitely not the case. Even off ball, Klay is always paying attention, and he's always looking to get in those passing lanes to get those steals and get in the fast break and get an easy layup or dunk for himself, or maybe kick it to one of his teammates for an easy layup or dunk or wide open three-point shot. Klay on the defensive side of the ball is probably one of, if not the most complete players on that side of the ball in the NBA. But typically when a lot of players come back from that ACL injury the following season, most of them do come back basically the same player, maybe a little bit less athletic, but there are a certain percentage that come back from that ACL injury completely not the same player, or maybe they lost a ton of athleticism. But when you're talking about an Achilles injury, that's a little more significant. There's definitely a higher percentage of players that come back from that Achilles injury completely not the same player. Maybe they lost a ton of athleticism, or maybe they just completely have to change their game altogether once they come back, and some players don't even come back from that Achilles injury. So when you're talking about Klay Thompson, who actually went through both injuries in a short period of time, what can we actually expect from Klay coming back this next season? Now, the one good thing about a guy like Klay Thompson going through his injuries rather than a different NBA player is Klay doesn't necessarily rely on his athleticism to actually perform well in the NBA, and what Klay's game is really predicated off of is his jump shot. So I think just due to that fact that his game is predicated mostly on his jump shot, he would have a lot easier time of actually transitioning back into the NBA than a different player would, of course. But let's say for the sake of the video that once Klay comes back to the NBA, I'm not saying this was going to happen and hopefully it doesn't, but let's say for the sake of example that he loses a ton of athleticism once he gets back to the NBA. How would that actually affect Klay? Now, in some aspects, I definitely think it would affect him in terms of those side steps and step back three-point jump shots, and maybe a little bit of a crossover and just quick turns and trying to jump as high as he can on those pull-up mid-range jump shots. But overall, I think Klay would learn to adjust, and mostly what Klay does very effectively is just spot it from that three-point range and really just come off down screens into a three-point jump shot and more jump shots like that. So I think in terms of just those catch and shoot jump shots and mostly what Klay does well, I think he's honestly going to be fine no matter how his athleticism is. Maybe some aspects of his game he would need to tweak, and maybe he wouldn't be as great off the ball and really creating for himself as he was previous, but mostly what Klay Thompson does best, I think he would honestly be fine with on the offensive side of the ball. Now, somewhere where it definitely could affect him is on the defensive side of the ball. So remember before in the video I mentioned that Klay's ability on the defensive side of the ball was very elite, and he's one of the best defenders we have in the NBA. But if Klay's athleticism was very heavily affected from these injuries coming back, I think it would definitely have an effect on his defensive ability, and he wouldn't be nearly the defender he was previous to those injuries. So that's definitely a negative for Klay Thompson going forward. But of course, hopefully when Klay comes back, he'll be the same guy in terms of his athleticism. But one thing I will say, once Klay comes back initially, either if that's at the beginning of the season or midway through the season, you're obviously going to see Klay a little tentative out there. He's not going to be the same player, of course, coming out of the gate, and he's going to be a little bit nervous, just like any other player would, to not injure his knee once again, or his Achilles. So you're going to see him a little tentative out there, and maybe he'll have some bad games, maybe he'll lose some confidence for a short period of time, maybe he won't be as good on the defensive side of the ball, at least at first. But once Klay really regains that confidence in his knee and also in his Achilles, I think in my opinion, he's basically going to be the same Klay that we knew and loved before all the injuries. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you guys think once Klay comes back to the NBA, he's basically going to be the same Klay Thompson, or do you think he's not going to be the same after the injuries? But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did enjoy, please leave a like and subscribe and hit that post notification bell. It really helps me out a lot. Until the next time, peace out, guys.